My name is Judy Goldring, Judygoldring. Today is May 8th, 1996, and I'm conducting an interview with Sylvia Weiss in Brooklyn, New York, United States of America. My name is Judy Goldring, Judygoldring. Today is May 8th, 1996, and I'm conducting an interview with Sylvia Weiss in Brooklyn, New York, the United States of America. Can you tell me your name given at birth?
My name was given at birth Sipora, and through the years I was called on a nickname party.
And your maiden name was?
My maiden name is Ashkenazi.
Can you spell it, please?
Ashkenazy. And my name that I used in Romania was Cecilia.
And what city were you born in? In Romania?
In Romania.
In Romania. And your year?
I lived in Bethlehem.
Bethlehem.
It's a big town in Transylvania, surrounded by the Carpathian Mountains. And that's where I spent my time, my life, till the Germans came in 1943, and then they deported us.
Tell me a little bit about your life as a young girl, about your parents.
My parents who lived in Bethlehem, and they had a lumber shop and other businesses. We were considered middle-class people, and we had quite a good life in Romania. We were all very nice to do, and I don't know why I'm so nervous today. And I remember since I was like maybe 6 years old, my father had built the house, and every Shabbos we used to go to see how much more was done on the building. And then the rest of my life we really lived in that house. It was right next to the lumber shop, and as we grew up we all helped out in the business. We were a very happy family. We were 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy.
What were your mother and father's names?
My mother's name was Rose. Her maiden name was Edelheid. My father's name was Julius Ashkenazi. He came from a family of 11 children, and he was the oldest.
And your sisters and your brother?
My sister was almost 2 years older than I am. Very pretty girl and very smart. Then I had a brother younger and a little sister 7 years younger than I, and this was our family. Besides that, of course, we had grandparents and uncles and aunts, and we were very happy children living a comfortable life.
Did your grandparents live with you?
With us, great-grandparents lived with, not with us in the house, but there was another little house next to our house that later became like a summer house where we used to do the big kitchen and washing, and they lived there. In fact, my great-grandfather died at the age of 93, and my grandmother also was close to that. But my grandparents lived in a town about 12, 13 kilometers. It was called Rattag. My grandfather was a quite big businessman there. He had a lumber shop also, and he was involved in all kind of town business, and he was an import and export and all kind of grain. A lot of people from all over the country used to come, and we used to love to go there because we met so many kinds of people, and it was so much fun that I have even today 2 sets of friends, one from Bethlehem and one from Rattag, and I feel at home with both sets because we spent so much time there, and those were very good years, very, very nice, happy years.
What was your education like? The schooling?
We went to public school, Romanian public school, and it was like a gymnasium afterwards. And I really don't remember the year, but Sarashnerer came and they opened the Besiakov. Of course, the Hasidim were against it. And my father was a cousin to the Satmar Rabbi, so naturally was against it. And the first year when Besiakov opened up, almost everybody in town, all the girls had joined, except almost me was left out. And I felt very lonesome. And the second year, my mother just didn't ask questions, and she enrolled me, and it was really a lot of fun. Learned a lot, and I remember we always went for Purim to Mazedi, and I was so proud that I was able to tell what Purim meant, and what holiday it is, and why it is. And a lot of the people who didn't go had no idea, because we never learned things like that. The only thing we learned how to say Ivra, and that was done by an old lady who came to your house for an hour, and used to put the alarm clock on the table, and I hated it. I just couldn't wait to the hour to pass because it was so boring. But once I joined Besiakov, it was really a lot of fun. They taught us how to interpret the davening and Tillim and Tanakh and Chumash, and really a completely different world opened up to us, especially to me. And I feel that it was a very good decision, and I think that it's wonderful today what girls are learning today.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm left out of something, I'm missing something.
Did you do any work before the war years? You were a young girl, but did you work?
No, nobody worked. Nobody worked. No women worked, no girls worked. The only work we did was help out in the business. And of course, we did embroidery and knitting a lot and all that stuff. And I used to love to sew. I always made doll dresses. And later, I really did go learn how to sew, and it helped me a lot. It saved me, many times it saved me my life in Auschwitz and all over. Mm-hmm. I always turn back to it. Mm-hmm. Go away and come back, and it helps.
What were market days like back home?
The market days?
Market days. By your grandfather, when the community came together.
I don't get you.
When they had the market days. And
the market days, yes, sure. Our market day was on Wednesday. And being that my grandfather was import-export grain buyer, he used to control the prices and the people who used to come buying. And the marketplace was next to the school. And every Wednesday it used to be very crowded. People came in with their produce and stuff. And when it came out for recess, I always used to go to see my Zeta. And if I asked the guys who came from Red Tag where my Zeta is, and they always used to say me where the crowd is. And I used to go there, and it was very crowded. And my grandfather, everybody was asking all kind of questions. And I used to go on my hands and knees between the legs of the people till I reached my Zaidi, and then I just picked myself up in front of him. I never forget, always gave me a kiss on my forehead and gave me 2 lays. That was like, not $2, but it was 2 pennies, but it was worth it, more than pennies. And he kissed his hand and crawled back under and went back to the girls. Everybody was waiting on the side of me, because they knew that the first place I'm going is to the candy store and buy candy. And of course, everybody had a bite of candy. So that was every Wednesday. Now, on Thursdays, the marketplace was in Red Tag, and my Zedelet. And being he was involved in so many business, he always needed more and more help. As we grew up, we used to go every Thursday morning with the bus to Red Tag to help out in the business there. We used to have in the winter these little lumber jackets with fur lining, and everybody has their own outfit there. As soon as we got there, we used to change in the fur hats because it was very cold, and we used to help out for the whole day. And it was really a lot of fun. Like I said, I met people there that they were really inspiration to me through the years. with their talks. Young men who I remember was a lawyer, and as the Hungarians came in, they didn't let him practice law. So he was a businessman now, and he used to come to buy stuff from my Zeta. And he was telling me that it's very important that everybody learn a trade, because there will come a time when they're not going to let us do anything. And my parents wanted me to learn how to sew because we had plans to go to Israel. My father had his sisters and one brother living there. And of course, being we were three girls, they always felt I was so handy that it would be good for me to learn how to sew. And my mother sent me to a place that I should learn. And the first 3 days, they gave me to make buttonholes, hand-bound buttonholes. And I hated it. And every day I did worse and worse. And after 3 days, I came home and I said to my mother, if that's all they teach you, I'm not interested. And I stopped. But then I met this young man, this lawyer, by my Zeta, and he explained to me how important it was. I went back home and told my mother that I really would like to learn how to sew professionally, but not in my hometown, because I loved the friends that I had in Red Tech so much better. So they said, well, if Zadie wants you for a year, it's okay with us. And of course, Zadie agreed to keep me for a year. And I went to learn and used to go early in the morning and come home for lunch, and I go back till the sun and there was daylight. You sat and worked, really worked, because my mother paid money for me that I shouldn't sweep the floors or go shopping or do things that didn't concern the sewing. And of course, I didn't like that because the other girls had fun because they sent them out shopping, and I had to sit and work. And now I really appreciate all that pressure that was put on me. And I had a lot of friends, very nice friends. I had friends who came to pick us up after work. This was a little more modern guy. His father also had a lumber shop and used to come by bicycle. And then we went on the end of the town to learn how to ride a bike. Somebody told my Zadie about it. And one Sunday, I never forget, he called me in and he said, Sipora? And then I knew I'm in trouble because nobody ever called me by the name. And he said, I don't really understand Jewish. He said, es passt nicht für eine Edelheit Einigl to ride a bicycle. And if you want to stay here, you got to give it up. Of course, I didn't think I gave it up completely, but it was nice that they were concerned about me.
So it was carefree times?
Carefree times, fun times, they were nice. In fact, this friend lives in California, and he still gives me a call once in a while. And we just had fun talking about old times, when we were teenagers, and what a good time we really had. So it was fun.
You didn't feel any anti-Semitism or?
Oh, and there was always a pressure. There was always. I mean, if you wanted something, you always had to give like a stip, they called that, you know, to smear, to give something, you could always get everything accomplished and everything done. But there was always a little that feeling because Jewish people were very, like even today, we like to have things. First of all, we keep our religion. That is so important, and with that comes other things, naturally. Preparing for Shabbos and shopping and clothing and to be tzniastic and and many times the people, the Christian people were against, you know, they didn't like that idea that we were maybe, I don't know, not better, but they thought that maybe we were better than they are. So it was always a little, I don't know, a little like something going in between. And of course we went to public school, so we had to go on Shabbos. The next door neighbor came and took our books, and that much they allowed us that Shabbos was always a very light classes like singing and reading and all that stuff that we shouldn't have to write. So that they allowed us.
But you were able to travel freely?
Yeah. Yeah, we traveled freely, traveled first class with the white gloves, the kid gloves, and all dressed up. And yes, we We had very nice life. It was very nice. Only later, when the Hungarians took over, that was Romania. Then later, when the Hungarians in the 30s, they took over, that's when they started to push us down more, and that's when we felt it, because they didn't allow us Christian help. They took away businesses that were connected with the government, and you felt a little bit more pressure than before.
Mm-hmm. In what year was it that everything changed?
Well, in the late 30s.
The late 30s.
Yeah, I really can tell you a year, but in the late 30s things were getting a little harder and different. I remember there was in the late when my father had a beard that he really couldn't travel. It was really a sakona. It was dangerous to travel. And my sister and brother, they used to go on the business shopping or buying the lumbers and stuff like that to the factories, because my father wouldn't take his beard off, so it was very difficult to travel.
When did the ghetto years begin for you?
Well, the ghettos didn't begin by us till the Germans came in, and that was in the 40s. 44 only. We were the last one, really.
Right.
Though with all the years that we heard what the Germans were doing in Poland, but we really didn't believe it. Nobody on their straight mind could have believed that anything happens like that. And really, we didn't know about camps. We never knew that there were camps. We just knew that they treat them very badly in Poland. But we didn't feel it. In fact, I know trains used to come from Poland with children, that they were putting on trains and bringing them down to Constanza, to the seashore, and sending them to Israel with boats. And they stopped in my hometown, in Bethlehem, by the station, and we had gone, people knew that the trains are coming with children, and we went out to the train, and we bought them food. And I remember they always used to say, don't stay here, go away, go to Israel, go to Israel. But nobody really, if you were a middle-class person, that was the hardest thing to do, to leave. A rich person who is really rich has lots of money in the banks in Switzerland and all over, and they could go. A poor person just took his bundle and one sack on the shoulder and left. It didn't make any difference if I'm here or there. And the middle class, these are the ones that suffered the most, because we didn't really believe it, and we didn't want to go. We had a beautiful home my father built. He had a nice business going. And, who wants to leave that and just go? But it didn't work that way, because once they came, they didn't ask any question how we feel or what we want. They just packed us up and out. And that was in 1944. It was Erev Pesach. In the lumber shop by us, there were 250 slave workers, the workers, the Jewish boys that they made slave workers, they called it Munkatábor. They were building roads. We really didn't know why they put so much effort on roads. But then later we found out, because the Germans came in with all that heavy artillery, they really needed roads. They just couldn't go on the mud roads. And these boys were working, and they located them in our lumber shop because it was so big, like a block long, like a nice big block. And there were a lot of, warehouses that they stored the stuff. So they kept them there, and they took away our dining room, and they made an office out of it. And we had all these boys there, and it was Erev Pesach, and some of the boys were frum and some weren't. So the frum ones wanted to go to shul for Pesach, and we had to get permission that so much people should march down the street. And, being we lived in that town, we know everybody there, the captain and the mayor and all that stuff. And of course I volunteered to go with one of the leaders from the group, to whoever was in charge of this thing. And I went down, but we had to wear stars already, the yellow stars. And it's really very hard to explain when they said the rule was that you sew on that yellow star that you cannot stick a pencil underneath it. But we just didn't, I don't know, we just felt that they didn't want to do it. And I went, and it was just pinned on the star. And we went down, we took care of it, they gave us permission that 100 boys could go one day and the others the next day. And as we come back, I feel somebody following us. There were 2 German soldiers with the guns on their shoulders. And all of a sudden, I said to this, one of the leaders from the boys was a lawyer. And he was the one that came with me, and another 2. And I said, you know, somebody's following us. I could feel it. And all of a sudden, they were in front of us, and they stopped us. And they asked me questions, and they said that I have to go to headquarters with them. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm underage, and I don't go without my mother. So he said, then you have to give me your address. And I gave him my address, and we rushed home. And the first thing I did is take a needle and thread and sew on my star on my coat. A really very short time passed by. They were there. And they said, you got to come down to headquarters. And I said, why? What did I do? You got to come down to headquarters. So I said, I'm not going alone. And they said, fine, so bring your mother with you. And my mother came with me, and there were 4 of them with a bayonet standing there around us, and everybody was just watching from behind the curtains. What's going on there? And they took me down. We had the government of the state lived there. His name was Bet Lambela. He was, actually, the town was named after this family. This was a tremendous rich family. They were Graf, barons, all that big titles that they had. And they lived across the street from us. And my father used to be in very good terms, because any time the Jewish people needed something, they always came to my father. My father knew what time he could meet him and talk to him. And we went down there on the streets, and it was really, it was on a Friday, Shabbos, that was Erev Pesach. And my sister right away ran to this grove to tell him that they took my sister away and my mother. And we went down to the headquarters. That was in one of the beautiful castles that they had in the middle of the town. And a German lieutenant started to interrogate me. And I said to him, I spoke German. And I said, what am I doing here? And he says, well, you left about America, the German soldier, and your star was loose, was blowing in the wind. I said, it's not, it's sewed on. Anyway, he said, what are you doing, calling the German soldier a liar? I said, no, maybe he just made a mistake. He didn't realize what he sees. Anyway, he started asking me questions. Are you married? What are you doing? And all kind of crazy things. And then I saw that the Graf came with the daughter. He had 4 daughters. And he came, and then they called this officer out, and I heard some heavy language going on next door, and then he came back, and he said, okay, you're on probation, you could leave. But before he said that, I will be killed, because I made a liar out of a German soldier, and that's punishable by death. They left me home, they let me go home, and I remember that I was just shaking afterwards. All that courage just came out of me. And my mother said, you stay in the house, you're not leaving the house anymore. And then it was Pesach, and it was very, very sad Pesach. When the Germans came to pick us up, we had the table set in the dining room. And they went in there, and they threw down the candlesticks with their gun. And he said, we are in war, and you're going to have such a feast tonight? Quite a few of the boys who were Shomer Shabbos came to join us for the Seder. And there isn't a Pesach, it's already 51 years passing by that I don't see my father's face. Then he said, L'Shana Hava B'Yerushalayim, how he was crying. Unfortunately, it never came true. But that was the last Pesach that we spent together. And after Pesach, Sunday, they just knocked on the door 4 o'clock in the morning, and they said, just take as much as you can in your 2 hands and get out of the house. That's how we left the house, and we walked out. They took us to the school, and that's where they accumulated all the people. And there were smaller towns that had few people, and we had to wait there till everybody got together. And once everybody was there for the region there, and they put us on wagons, the older people, the sick people, the children, and we young people walked. And we still made fun out of it. It was still fun, as long as we were together. And we walked about 30-some kind of miles to a city named Dej. They took us up in the woods there, and they made a camp like this, rounded with barbed wires, and we had to make tents, and that's where we lived for 6 weeks. The men were going out to work every day on railroad track, but we really didn't know that when those railroad tracks are finished, that's the finish of our stay there. And her life was very difficult there. It was very, very primitive. We had to cook on open fire like Indians, and it was really quite hard, but it was springtime, and it was, we were together, the young people, and we always did the best. We always had fun, whatever it was. But it was a lot of rains and a lot of misery, and when it came already after 6 weeks and the railroad track was already boarded to the camp, and they said that they're gonna start loading the cattle wagons, and I remember my Zayda said, let's go. I mean, this was enough. Maybe Meshana Muka, Meshana Mazel, maybe our luck will change. Unfortunately, it didn't change, and ever since, I always, when I want to say that word, I keep myself back, and I said, no, it didn't work then. So that's what happened, and that was a week before Shavuos, a couple of days.
Okay, we'll take a break for a moment.
Okay. The cattle wagons, and it was volunteer, whoever wanted to go. And like I said, the family decided to leave this rural place and try something better. They pushed us into the cattle wagons, I don't know how many, but it was very, very crowded. They gave you a pail there, and no food, just what you had, and you were able to take along, and the train started rolling. And we went for about 4 days like that. We went through countries and countries, and we really didn't know where we were. Nobody had any idea of where we are or where we're going. Some people said, oh, we're going to just camp, and the young people will work, and the parents will take care of the children. All kind of stories, but nothing. Honestly, I never knew there is an Auschwitz in the world. And after 5 days or so, 4 days, 5 days, it was May 26, 1944, the first day of Shavuos. That happened to be my birthday too. And every time as a child, they used to make me a cake, and I used to have a party. Not too many people had birthday parties, but I always had a party. I went to Red Tech, to my Zaidi, and over there my aunts and my friends there, they were all invited to my cake party. And that's when we arrived to Auschwitz. Very, very, very sad day. Actually, we arrived the second day in the morning, early in the morning. And we arrived on the railroad tracks there in Auschwitz, and the chaos was just started. Screaming, low slows, out. There were many, many dead people in the wagons as they died on the way. And it was just really after 5 days just sitting there and standing, and it was just unbelievable. As soon as we got out of the trains, we were right away, men separate, women separate, as I'm sure everybody had seen pictures. And I remember when we got off the train, I just looked back and I heard my father say, whoever survives should go to Israel. And this is something that stuck in my mind. My father wasn't feeling well because when we were in the ghetto, they were picking up the rich people, people who were better off, not rich really, but okay, and they took them for interrogations. They wanted to know if they had hidden away money and gold and silver. And this was on a Friday in the ghetto. And they took my father early in the morning, and it was already noontime, and he didn't come back yet. They were very upset. And all of a sudden, 2 German soldiers come, and they said they want to take my mother for interrogation. And I don't know what happened, just opened my mouth, and I said, my mother has heart problems, she can't go. So he said, so you come then. And I went. And as I walked into the woods, I see my father on the right side sitting by a trunk of a tree on the floor holding his feet. They had beaten his feet and burned it, and he couldn't stand after that. And I looked at my father, and he just very slightly moved his head this way. So I knew that he meant no, that he didn't say anything. And they took me into this little hut that they had. They started asking me questions. Your father was a rich man. Where is the gold? Where did you hide the silver? And I said, we didn't have any. We weren't rich. We just lived there. We had a business from day to day. He said, no, you were considered one of the rich ones. And my father had an ulcer, and he was sick a couple of years. And I said to him, well, whatever we had, it went to the doctors because my father was sick. And we spent a lot of money for hospitals and doctors. He was operated, and he got better afterward. And I said, this is where the money is. And they said to me, start taking off your shoes. And I know that what's next. But I don't know what happened. I just started untying my shoes, and then they said, okay, forget it, you could go. And that's what happened, that I knew my father. My father couldn't even walk. My uncle had to help him get off the train because that's how bad his feet were. But I did hear his last words that we should go to Israel. Then, of course, we went through Auschwitz, all the stuff from the men we never heard anymore. I never heard from my brother anymore, or my parents, or anybody. And my little sister went with my mother. She was about 11 or 12 years old. And my sister and I just turned around, and my mother had sisters who were not much older than we. And she did not come with us. The only one from the whole family, about 35 people who went on this wagon, 2 of us were left, my sister and I. And I remember just hugging each other and said, oh, thank God that we're together.
Let's go back to the selection when you first arrived in Auschwitz.
So this is where I'm going now.
Okay.
So from there, we were walked, this was Birkenau, Auschwitz. From there, we walked us to the gas chambers. Those were actually the beds that they went in to get a shower. And many times, instead of the shower, the gas used to come. And I remember as we were lined up there, 5 in a row, they said, get undressed. And then we started taking off clothes. It so happened that we had like a dress and another dress and a coat because we felt that's all that we're going to have. And not only that, but we had sewed in gold chains and nuggets into buttons that if we need, we should be able to buy food to survive with it. And here we really didn't want to part from these clothes because that was our lifeline. But the Germans said, take off your clothes. So we started taking off things, put them down on the floor, step up, take off more, and we start taking. And then finally you were just left in your underwear. And they said, take it off or we shoot you. I remember that was the lowest point in my life when I had to drop off my underwear. It was just from a sheltered life that we lived to have to undress in front of thousands of soldiers there and the workers, the people from Poland who were there already 2-3 years. The shame, the degradation, the feeling that I went through, it was absolutely unbearable. And then they cut our hair off. I was like a dirty blonde and blue-eyed, the Germans' favorite colors. And then they marched us into the showers. And by that time, all these Polish guards who were working there, everybody was telling us things. We should just watch the showers. It wouldn't do us any good if we watch it and it doesn't come. Anyway, we watched the showers. By that, we knew already that this is the gas chamber. And we stayed there, I remember, and finally a little water started dripping. And what a relief that it wasn't the gas, it was water. We took showers, and you went on the other side, and they threw some schmatter dress from all the beautiful clothes that you wore, a schmatter dress, and they let you keep your own shoes. That was one thing. And then they walked us back to Lager C. That was the death camp that they called it, because every week Mengele used to come select people to take the gas chamber and the healthy one to work. We were put in a barrack 29, just the two of us, my daughter, my sister and I. And of course we were about 14 or 15 from our hometown girls together. The first night, it was absolute chaos in that barrack. In fact, I have a picture of that barrack somewhere. And the mothers were screaming for their children. Children were screaming for their mothers, sisters. It was just a completely chaos. And a couple of minutes later, this capo opens those two big doors and says, you see those two chimneys? You see those flames? That's where your parents are. So don't let anybody tell you that you're going to see them on Sunday, that they are well and alive, because they are not there anymore. He says, if you want to survive, stop this crying and this feeling sorry for yourself, and keep your energy to survive, because they are not here anymore. I really don't know how we were able to take all that shock one after the other. But I guess God gives you strength when it comes to it. And we were in that barrack for almost 5 months, because every time Mengele came to select, my sister was brown-eyed, dark complexion, and I was a light complexion, and they always separated us. And we always had to maneuver and finagle and buy ourselves back together. My sister was a very smart girl. She would have really been something special. She was very good in math. She was like a mathematician, and she was genius. She was very, very well read. Because in Europe, to get books, there were no library that you walk in. But she had read just about everything that there was available from teachers and from other people. She took it very hard, because when we were in the ghetto, she wanted to escape. She used to go out with the doctor every day to the hospital to work. And one day she came back and she said to my parents, there's a way to escape. I could get out and not come back anymore. And my mother said, fine, but she got to go with you. That means me. And I said, no, if it's good for my mother and father, it's good for me too. I'm not going anywhere. And they didn't let her go. And all this time we were in Auschwitz, I always felt guilty that it was my fault that she feels so bad. Meanwhile, she started to get sick. She had a low-grade fever. And there was there a Jewish doctor that we used to, you went to check, and she said that she had TB. And that we shouldn't drink from the same pot anymore. And I felt very bad because I always let my sister eat first from the pot and then I ate. And here the doctor said, you eat first or try to get another pot. Now sewing came in again handy because the capos took blankets and we made them jackets. It used to be very cold at night. And I started sewing for the capos for extra food. And they used to give me like an extra pot with food. And from that food, next lager between the electric wires was the Che lager was called. It was a family lager. They were there already a couple of years. They were walking skeletons. They were unbelievable. I never saw in my life, just like a skeleton walking. This is how skinny they were already. And they had no food. But they had things to sell, like clothes and shoes. I don't know how they got it. And they had medication, aspirin. So I used to exchange food for aspirin for my sister. I felt very, very guilty because I always felt that maybe I didn't do the right thing but not trying to escape. But it was gone and we were there. And I was, and when we got to Auschwitz, every morning, 5 o'clock, we used to go out to Zelapel. And then they gave us a little black coffee. And I couldn't drink that coffee. And when I drank it, I cried every morning. 10 years after I was in America, I met somebody in the country. And she says, I know you from somewhere. And we start going back and we just can't get together. A day later, she comes over to me and she says, you were in Auschwitz, you were Block 29, yeah, you had a sister with you, and you cried every morning? I said, that's me. He says, after 10 years, she recognized my face. She says, I remember you. You were such a pain, always crying. She said, we were afraid we're going to be punished because you make such records. This is how Auschwitz went through. And we were there till October. It was Hoshana Rabbah, and Mengele came in to make a selection. The Russians were already gaining the war, and they were coming closer, and they had to empty out the camps. And he came and made a very big selection. It was such a strict selection that they put out German soldiers from Block 29 to 30 going across. And the soldiers were standing lined up there with their guns, and you had to go through this, so you wouldn't be able to escape anywhere. Because every time there was selection, you tried to escape. And as we passed by and went into Block 30, we made up with my sister. My sister was very skinny already, and she wasn't feeling well. And we made up, and I said, you go first. Wherever you go, right or left, I follow you. Because, Mengele had how do you call, with his stick, used to say, you go right, you go left. My sister goes left. He tells her, go left, and I don't say nothing. I just march after her. All of a sudden, somebody stops me on the shoulder, taps me with a stick. And I look back, and it's Mengele, and he says to me, you go right. I said, no, I go left. And I argue with him. And he says, no, you go there. And before I turned around, my sister is gone. And that's the last I saw of her. Now, that night, they took all these girls. There were over 1,000 in another barrack, because there were 1,000 people in one barrack. And we tried to go to pull her out. The guns were flying over our heads. We were going on hands and knees, and we could not get to that barrack. It was a couple of barracks down. We couldn't get my sister out, and that's when my sister was killed. After that, my guilt conscience just rose to the highest point in my life. I felt guilty for everything, for not escaping, not helping, for just about everything bothered me. And I made up my mind that I want to die here too. I didn't want to eat, I didn't want to drink, I was just sitting on the barracks and doing what they were telling me. And there was just nothing that anybody could do for me to get out of this depression. And I just set them wait to be one day taken away and killed or whatever. A couple of days after Hoshana Rabbah, it was in October, some of the girls from my hometown came in very happy, screaming, "Becca, we're going." Where are we going? We're going, there is a Red Cross here, they want 500 people, and they're taking them to a working camp, and we got to get out of here. And everybody's running, and I'm sitting. And some of the girls came over, and they said, "You coming too?" And I said, "No, I'm not going anywhere, I want to die here." And she said, "Listen, we're 14, we don't want to be left 13. Let's go." And they schlepped me out. It was raining and muddy. I remember it was so hard to walk, the mud, you could just pull your feet out. And this was block 29 to block 1, that's 9 blocks, 29 blocks to run. And we got to the gate of Auschwitz, and they were counting. We were the last one that got in the group, and 500 was chosen, and the gate was closed. And we walked from there to the gas chambers again, and there we had to be, disinfected. They used to spray you with a certain powder, and you had to go to all kind of things, and they gave you new clothes, they washed you, you took a bath, and they washed you, and they sprayed you, and they put you in and Mengele comes again for another selection. Now, this was a naked selection. I had a pimple on my stomach, and anything that he saw that it wasn't that, out. I didn't know what to do. But at this point already, it's so funny that when you drown, you grab at a straw. At this point, you want to live already. And I scraped off the white paint from the wall and put it on this pimple here to make the makeup on it. And Mengele came and he looked us over, and we passed. And we went into the cattle wagons again, and they locked the door and they kept it there. Meanwhile, you could hear the Russians coming and fire were going, and everybody said, "Oh, they put us in here and now they're going to drop a bomb on us and we're going to be finished." But that didn't happen, because in the afternoon, as the sun was going down, the doors opened and they brought us bread and some jam and other things, and they said, "This is enough for 3 or 4 days, you have to have enough." And they closed the door and the train started going.
You still had German soldiers with you then, or the Red Cross?
No, Germans. Still Germans. And we went for about 3 or 4 days, I don't remember exactly, till we arrived in a station, and we looked out, there's a big Hakenkreuz under, and the word Nuremberg. We got out of the train, and they lined us up 5, and we marched to the city. It was all bombed, and some place better than others. And we look on the streets, and there are people there walking in suits and hats and coats and mink collars, and everybody's all dressed up, and pocketbooks. I remember we were so impressed. "You mean people walk with pocketbooks too?" And they walk us, and people look at us like crazy. This was the only women camp in Nuremberg. And they took us in the end of town. And as we arrived there, we saw a nice little camp, beautiful new barracks, about 5 or 6 barracks, and there was black tar on the floor and a fence around it. And these German ladies, soldiers, came in their black capes, and they said, "Where do people come from that you look so bad?" I mean, our hair was like 5 months haircut only. And
I don't know if they didn't know there is an Auschwitz or something, but they certainly acted like. And they put us in rooms, like 24 in a room, on cots. Everybody got a blanket and like a straw mattress. And next, the end of the barrack was a shower room made out of tiles. And we started jumping and hugging. Oh, God didn't forget us. Listen, look, this is luxury. And they said they're going to give us a couple of days to recuperate from the trip. And I never forget, they gave us bread with seeds. Every time I feel a seed, I always think of Nuremberg. And we took showers, a regular shower. It was absolutely unbelievable, such a change. And then after 3 days, they said they're going to start selecting people for work. There were 3 kinds of jobs available. One was one of the barracks on the premises that they were making precision works for bombs. And then there was another one that if your vision was good, if your eyesight was good, you worked on the precision work. And then the girls who were stronger went out from the camp every day to work on big pieces from tanks and with metal and all that stuff. And the other one was, I don't even remember what the other job was, and then they selected people for the kitchen work. I wasn't selected for nothing. I really didn't know I had astigmatism in my right eye. But I knew that my vision wasn't 100%. I didn't wear glasses or anything because my left eye was good. Even 30 years later, I never wore glasses. But anyway, I wasn't selected for nothing yet. 3 days after we arrived there, a bombing came one night. And we had to, they showed us that there were shelters, and everybody belonged to this shelter and to that shelter. And they were bombing, and everybody had to run to the shelter. We were there till the morning in the shelter. The shelter looked like a zigzag made. And when we got out in the morning, a couple of barracks were burned down already. That was the end of the luxury, and we had to double up, like 2 people share a bunk now, and it was getting a little difficult. And then one of the barracks that was a working barrack, they made into a living quarters, and girls started working. But after the bombing, we used to go out to clean up. We had to clean up, and some of the girls were lazy. They didn't want to go. They were cold. But I always volunteered. I had this temperament in me that I couldn't just sit still. And I volunteered to go out to pick stuff from the rebels and the burning stuff. And little by little, the Germans needed help to wash the windows and do their ironing and stuff like this. And I volunteered for all these jobs. And they came to know me. And they gave me extra food, and they gave me even an apple once. It was a big thing. And I don't know why, but I started feeling not so good. I started having a low-grade fever, and I was afraid that I also had TB. After a couple of days feeling that way, I went into this ambulance, this was called. One of the rooms was made into a hospital thing. And I went in there, the doctor took my temperature, she checked me, and she said, oh, just stay a couple of days here, we're going to observe what's going to develop. I stayed in that ambulance, and I happened to have typhoid. And I was very, very sick. There were times that I really wasn't even conscious. I didn't even know what was going on with me. Girls were taking away my clothes, my shoes, because I was already dying. And I lay there. The only thing I remember is that they used to put wet towels around me because there was no medication for the fever to come down, so they used to roll me in wet towels to get the fever down. And there was an old German guard who was humane. He wasn't a Nazi. And he used to throw in a couple of aspirins in the window when he used to do his rods. And I was just laying there, and they were waiting I should die. The Germans used to come in every day because they, as they counted the Zählerfeld, they had to know how many were in the ambulance, that they were missing. And they used to ask always, they called me the Kleine.
The small one.
Small one, yeah. And they used to come in and they used to say, how is the Kleine? And the doctor used to say, oh, she feels much better, she feels much better. Because if they knew that I wasn't conscious, they wouldn't have kept me there. I was unconscious for quite a few days. And then one day, I had a dream. And I dreamt that my mother came and fed me, and I was feeling so much better. And the next morning, I just sat up in bed, and everybody looked like it was amazing. She's coming back from the dead. And I said, you know, my mother was here last night, and I had food, and I tell them what kind of food she bought me, what she fed me with. And everybody looks at me like I'm crazy.
Okay, stop a moment.
Morning, I sat up and started telling everybody that my mother was here. Then one of the girls, who was older than I, came over later to me and said, you know where you are? And I said, yeah, sure. You know where we're coming from? Sure, from Auschwitz. Where are your parents? I said, well, they were killed in Auschwitz. So she said, how could you say that your mother was here? And I started crying. And she said, your mother wasn't here, but she certainly prayed for you. That you should survive, and you have to survive, and now that you're feeling better, you're going to work at that. I made up my mind that there is no use. If everything that I went through is, and I am here, I have to go on. And I started feeling better, and I couldn't work. I must have been 70 pounds. I couldn't walk. People used to come, help me, teach me how to walk, to hold on to people. And little by little I had a cane, and then I started holding on at the walls and walking around like that. Then on January 2nd, 1945,